Hello, and welcome back to the course of U.S. history. I am your host, Mr. Samuelson. Last time we were together, we looked at English settlers in Virginia, the Jamestown colony, and how they went through some rough times but eventually thrived. Today, we're going to see somewhat of a repeat of that story as we look at the Pilgrims in Plymouth. Oh, look at those cartoonist pilgrims. Yeah, they're not the Pilgrims. These are the Pilgrims. And through them, we are going to continue to learn about the settlement of the 13 colonies. First, however, we need some English history here. So let's leave American history for a moment. Let's look at English history because it's kind of important. These are English settlers after all. In the 1500s, England abandoned Roman Catholicism. They said, we don't need the Pope anymore. We don't need anybody else telling us how to practice our Christian faith. And they formed the Church of England. Henry VIII right here was a man who decided to do that, and he, of course, made himself the head of the Church of England. Now, practitioners of the Church of England are called Anglicans. So if you are an Anglican, you are a member of the Church of England. They retain a lot of their Catholic traditions. This was largely about them having control over their own religion and not having an external person in charge of them, rather than dramatically revolutionizing what their religion looked like. So Anglican faith looks a lot like Catholic faith in a lot of ways. Puritans were a group in England that wanted to get rid of all of this Catholicism that they saw around them, even in the Anglican Church. Puritans wanted to purify the church, get rid of anything that looks like anything that was Catholic. Getting rid of the costumes, the incense, all of that stuff. Now, separatists are a group of Puritans that felt so strongly about these beliefs that they had to leave the country. They thought Catholic influence was such a negative thing that you had to do everything within your everything possible to get rid of that influence in your life, to get away from it. And so they leave England. They actually leave and go to the Netherlands for a little while and decide, we don't like this. So they go back to England, and then they leave England once they get a charter from the Virginia Company. The Pilgrims go to the Virginia Company and say, hey, we want to create a settlement within Virginia. And the Virginia Company says, cool, we can do that. And they work it out, they negotiate it, and off the Pilgrims are ready to go once they have their boat. Yes, the Mayflower. A lot of people confuse this. They think that the Jamestown settlement was the Mayflower. It is important to know this is the Plymouth colony, the Pilgrims, they are the ones going on the Mayflower. And it was the leader of these separatist Puritan Pilgrims, John Carver, who arranges for passage on the Mayflower. However, just like with those poor Jamestown settlers, they have some trouble. Storms hit them while they are out to sea and blow their ship significantly off course, and they do not land anywhere close to Jamestown. They instead land in present-day Cape Cod, Massachusetts, hundreds of miles off course. You can see right here in the map. Here's Jamestown. Their course blew them up here instead. So they are way far away from the central government in Virginia. And once they get so far away from Virginia, it doesn't make sense for them to really be governed by the Virginia House of Burgesses. It's too far of a distance. It would not be practical. So they have to do something about the fact that they have no government. And what they do is they create the Mayflower Compact. It's basically all of the men on that boat saying, we agree to collectively create these laws and to follow these laws. And they all sign it, and they have themselves a government. And one of their first actions is to elect John Carver, who was already their leader in a lot of ways, to be their official governor. So the governor of the Plymouth colony will be John Carver. Now the Pilgrims get off their boat. After a few landings, they landed here, which is modern Provincetown, and a couple other places. It's all just too sandy around here for farms, and they recognize that pretty quickly. They wind up settling over here in Plymouth in December. Now, landing in New England in December pretty much means that you're landing to a whole bunch of snow. It's pretty cold up there. They're not going to have a whole lot of food. And about half the Pilgrims, including Carver, die during that first winter. So you think back to the problems Jamestown had, Pilgrims could have maybe studied their history a little bit and been a little bit better prepared than they were. But they didn't study their history, and sometimes when you don't study your history, half of you die. Moving on. Without John Carver, the Pilgrims have to find their new leader. They do. This gentleman right here, love the mustache. This is William Bradford, and he's going to be the governor of the Plymouth colony moving forward. Now, in that spring, the Pilgrims meet Samoset, a Native American who speaks English. This has got to be a creepy moment for them, to be greeted in Massachusetts by somebody who is speaking English. But these are not the only people in the area. There had been some fishermen who had made their way across to fish those waters. It was not a completely unknown area, and Samoset had made contact with some of them and learned a little bit of English. Wasn't fluent, knew some English. Now, Samoset is going to introduce them to other natives within the region. Notably, Chief Massasoit, who's in charge of the Wampanoag tribe, one of the most powerful tribes in that particular region, and Squanto, who also speaks English. This is seriously creepy at this point. Like, how does this happen? Well, Squanto had actually spent time in England. Yeah, they arrive, cross half the world, meet these Native Americans to discover the well-traveled Squanto. He'd actually been captured and enslaved and brought over to Europe, and over a few years had worked his way over to England before catching a ride on a ship, on a fishing vessel, back to his home. So he was probably one of the better traveled Native Americans of the world at the time, and knows English quite well. Now, the Wampanoag, through Squanto, are going to teach the Pilgrims to farm. The Pilgrims were largely city folk. They didn't know a lot about how to farm, particularly in Massachusetts. The following year, the Pilgrims have a tremendous harvest. They do really well. And to thank the Wampanoag for this, and of course to thank God, because the Pilgrims are very religious people, they hold the first Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a religious feast. Modern Thanksgiving, not so much. But this first Thanksgiving, and I do put that in quotes because it wasn't really the first Thanksgiving. There was one in St. Augustine years before that, and there are, of course, many Thanksgivings outside the United States. But this is the one that we celebrate. Let's just forget history for a moment. Let's just go with popular culture. This is the first Thanksgiving. Now, in 1621, the Pilgrims are going to receive a charter for the Plymouth colony. They no longer have to pretend that they're sort of this Virginia outpost. No, they're going to be their own colony. And we now officially have the Plymouth colony. Next time, we're going to look at the settling of the rest of New England. The Plymouth colony is going to get it started, but pretty soon we're going to have Massachusetts, we're going to have Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Hampshire. Vermont and Maine, yeah, they're part of New England today, but they don't really count. Sorry, Vermont. Sorry, Maine. But yeah, you're just really not important to our story. The others, well, you'll see next time. Hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you next time. Farewell.